Well, that's all right. Finally back on.
Right. Okay, what?
Yeah, I was just asking which one I kept it. I wouldn't hear last week.
Well, that's the one with Ms. Davis.
Yeah, you better get it.
Huh?
You better explain.
Yeah, well, like you said, we didn't take no action on the last time, so it's not an actionable item.
Oh, yeah.
That's right, I tell. Well, Ms. Davis, it's not an actionable item. Right?
No, no, because we're gonna continue, we're gonna do a continuance on the public hearing.
Okay.
So that's gonna come up after, the appearance. Mr. Reagan's. That's my wife said.
The video is showing.
Push it down. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we got a kind of a part time, but she's gonna be taking over for Easter. I tried to give a this, but I wasn't there. Yeah, that's the word. Entertaining.
Yes, I'll do this again. That particular. Mr. Reagan will be here, we can step out for a second.
Well, see, nobody steals them. You did it? It's
Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Reggie.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Invocation. Mr. Bader, would you so kindly give us the invocation?
Yeah, I will. I'd like to pray a prayer that's given on St. Michael the Archangel, defends the battle. Here I stand, your angels against the snares of the devil. May God rebuke you, we pray, do thou also the power of God, cast into hell, Satan, and all evil spirits, prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Jeff Fidel,
Here.
Brad Ford,
Present.
Clint Prater,
Here.
Lyle Fogelman, Vernon Martin,
Here.
Stephen Primo,
Here.
Sandy Reggie,
Here.
Kim Stringfellow, here, Byron Wilridge.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, appearances. Citizens Against Life, CAT, presentation, please. Is that you, Steve?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Primo.
CAB steering committee has asked me to present our monthly update at this meeting. The CAB steering committee is comprised of Emily Stoma, chairman, Katie Alamon, Margaret Young, myself, and Tim Mayer. As we mentioned last month, our plan from now on is to have each of our committee members present a monthly update to demonstrate the commitment that each of us has in removing blight from the face of this great city. We want to thank the Post-Signal again for its continuing coverage of Crowley's blight problem. Their photos and commentary highlighting the problem of abandoned and deteriorated homes have been very effective. We are receiving more and more comments from people all over town who see the dramatic increase in numbers of structures being removed. And with our chairman's phone number being included in each monthly Post-Signal article, she is inundated with calls for many days afterward. We estimate that over 100 structures have either been repaired and made livable or demolished since CAB began this mission last year. That's certainly good news, but that success is bringing with it the new challenge of more homelessness around Crowley. With the Welcome House gone and fewer abandoned structures for the homeless to move on to, it seems that more and more people are being seen sleeping in our parks or in a makeshift shelter in parking lots. We are receiving numerous calls each week requesting our assistance with this problem. We pointed out here as evidence of the blight problem being noticeably addressed in Crowley, but homelessness will also surely need to be addressed now with greater passion. Our numbers clearly show that the large majority of reduction in blight is occurring in West Crowley. So we're now attempting to turn attention to blight reduction in South Crowley. South Crowley has an estimated 205 structures that CAB has identified for condemnation. And we are reaching out to owners there who are in need of the kind of assistance that CAB is offering. During this past month, we have submitted an application for condemnation of 17 mobile homes on R1 zone lots located in Standard Mills subdivision. We invite the mayor and the alderman of South Crowley to feel free to send anyone who could use our help to our chairman for direction and assistance. We are in the process of writing the city again to confirm the structure condition ratings that were arrived at by CAB volunteers a year ago, with a rating of 5 being the worst case, and at the mayor's suggestion, we intend to work with code enforcement to quickly look at all of the 3s and 4s in order to remove from our list any of those that code enforcement would officially consider habitable at this time. That's it for this month. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Bingle. Next is Miss Peggy Sanders, and I don't see her here. This is about the National Day of Prayer. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Next on the agenda is Mr. Jason DeQueer about bill number HB 681. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, I guess. Did that work? Yes, yeah, the queer, that's correct. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Alderman. Appreciate you all having me, inviting me to the agenda. On your agenda is House Bill 681 that deals with centralized sales tax collection. I guess before I begin, just by way of introduction, I am the co-owner of Advances Consulting, and most recently we hired one of Crowley's finest, Amy Tippett, who's sitting back here, and she's working with us and doing a tremendous job. I told her not all meetings she has to come to with me, but this one most certainly. I needed her presence. But I'll tell you just kind of and I'll be brief, because I really want this to be informative and allow you all to ask whatever questions you have of me. Although I'm with Advances Consulting, I'm wearing a different hat today. About a year or so ago, I was asked to chair the Centralized Sales and Use Tax Study Group. And I know that's a long name, but basically what this study group was designed to do was to try to figure out how Louisiana could get its sales tax collection system not just on par with the rest of the country, but some of you may have heard of the recent United States Supreme Court in Wayfair, where if your state and local sales tax system is not compliant with that United States Supreme Court case, it could prevent us, meaning the state and local governments, from collecting all of the sales tax dollars that are due to it based on what we now know is remote sales or basically online sales. The law used to be across the country that you had to have physical presence in the state in order to collect from a business. Well, more recently, they moved to what's called an economic nexus test. And now it allows us, all these little retailers that are popping up that don't have bricks and mortar in the state of Louisiana, or more specifically in Crowley, but may be selling into Crowley, you now have the right to collect sales tax from them. But the case also said we must have a system that's not unduly burdensome and one that complies with Wayfair. And that's the part that we're struggling with. I will tell you, I not only have experience representing business and industry, but I've also done my time as a collector. I was with the Department of Revenue for 3 years, and I worked very closely with state and local tax collectors throughout my 25-year career. And this is something that we had been looking at since my days at the Department of Revenue. And as this study commission got up and going, I will tell you, both sides, both business, industry, collectors, and members of the legislature asked me to chair the committee. So basically, as this commission moved forward, the idea was, how do we structure our Constitution to allow for a system that will continue to keep us in play and collect the dollars that are due to us. Not only that, we need to start figuring out a system that will be easier for businesses to navigate. And I will tell you, that commission was made up of 19 stakeholders. You had representatives from LMA, Municipal Association, Police Jury, the School Board, the Sheriff's Association, Department of Revenue, individual collectors, legislators, and business folks. And I'm going to tell you, we had some long meetings. We met for a period of a couple of months, and we spent numerous hours exploring our system in the direction that Louisiana needs to go. And I will tell you, at the end of that commission, it was unanimously adopted that Louisiana needs to go in and amend our Constitution such that we can be compliant with the new laws in terms of collecting remote and online sales and getting our system on par with the rest of the country. That then spiraled into a constitutional amendment that was most recently on the ballot this last fall. And simply, that constitutional amendment just allowed for a system to be built. It was going to be one entity, and it was going to have 8 members of that entity, basically 8 board of directors, if you will. 4 of them were going to be from local government. The Department of Revenue would have an appointee, the governor would have an appointee, the speaker would have an appointee, and the president of the Senate would have an appointee. So local government was going to be very well represented, and very much had a lot of control over this entity. I will also tell you that the legislation that you saw before you last fall was definitely worked on and primarily drafted by local sales tax collectors. And there was an agreement with industry to move this far. It did not pass on the ballot in November. And I just want to pause a second, and I did invite the Speaker of the House as well as the Vice Chairman of Ways and Means, Bo Boye, They're obviously stuck at the Capitol right now. It's still in meetings, but they did send their regrets. But I will tell you that after that amendment did not pass on the ballot, the state of Louisiana and several local parishes got sued by an out-of-state company. That suit right now is pending in federal court. And I will tell you, the outcome of that suit wouldn't be good for business and industry, and it wouldn't be good for government either. It is basically a suit that would create an injunction. If the taxpayer was successful in his challenge, it would prevent local governments from collecting sales tax, period. That's dangerous. And the theory behind that suit is that our Louisiana sales tax collection system is no longer compliant with what the U.S. Supreme Court says. That is the very layman's version of that suit, but it's real. It's been filed. The 4 parishes have attorneys. The Department of Revenue has attorneys, and of course, the out-of-state Arizona company has attorneys. And we're following this daily. And I'll tell you, the outcome of this would not be good for Louisiana. But in lieu of that, what we were trying to do through the Constitution Amendment is strike a compromise so that we can get Louisiana compliant, ensure that we won't get any lawsuits filed against us, so that we can continue to collect the money that's due us, basically in the way this economy is and the way that we're transacting business. So I don't know the outcome of that suit, but that's very relevant because the Speaker of the House has refiled this bill, which is on your agenda, House Bill 681. And the reason he has refiled it is partly due to the lawsuit. If that lawsuit or the taxpayer were to prevail, it could enjoin, stop local governments from collecting sales tax, particularly online. So nobody wants that to happen. And so the thought would be, let's refile this constitutional amendment. Now, if this amendment were to pass on the ballot, it does not like a light switch. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden this entity isn't. There are transition periods built into the Constitution. It has at least a year or 2-year period for a statutory framework to be enacted, where we would need to bring the stakeholders back together, ensure that we have the proper controls in there, the proper budgeting, how you're going to hire employees, and all of those sorts of things. I do know that some of the concerns as well, if we have this entity, we're concerned about the state collecting our money and sending it back to us. Well, one, you all would be in control of the entity through your local representatives. Secondly, right now, for remote sales, the state is already collecting your tax dollars. You do not collect those. You are paying the remote sales commission housed in the Department of Revenue a fee to collect your sales tax dollars, and you wouldn't have the same representation that you would have through this entity proposed in HB 681. So if this were to pass, that commission would then be wrapped into this HB 681, this new entity, the centralized sales tax entity, and they would be in charge of collecting remote sales, be in charge of conducting a lot of the audits. But it would also be a centralized place for the local businesses, the in-state businesses, to collect and pay their taxes as well. And so I know there's been a lot of rumors, and I appreciate Alderman Cavell reaching out to me. He gave me about a 3-page list of questions, and we had a good couple of hour phone conversation in terms of trying to go through a lot of his questions, which were very good questions, sorting out the details. But by way of that conversation, Alderman asked me to appear and says that, look, there's a lot of confusion, and we did do road trips throughout the state trying to unravel some of the confusion, alleviate some of the concerns. But I do want, this council to understand that this was not, business and industry trying to force this down anybody. This was not a certain sum of legislatures. This was the long work of local collectors, the state legislators coming together and unanimously saying, this is the direction that Louisiana needs to go for the future of our sales tax collection system. So I know that's a mouthful, and there's a lot layers and details underneath that. And Mayor, if you will, at this time, I just kind of pause and see, if there are any questions or concerns that I may be able to provide some answers to. So.
Mr. Incumbent?
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. DeQueer, this is the same, bill that the voters voted no on?
It is, it's a good question. So, yes, that bill, obviously the voters voted it down, that November. So the bill had to get refiled, and it is basically in the same posture as the constitutional amendment that did not pass last November, if I'm answering your question.
I'm just confused as to why it would come back up again if the voters didn't want it.
So a couple of thoughts there. One, that last election cycle, there was not a lot of things on the ballot. The turnout was not really great in a lot of parts of the state. I think this coming November, you've got all the congressional races that are on the ballot. I do think you'll have a more significant turnout. The only real thing that was driving voters out was the city of New Orleans.
So this will be on the ballot for this
It
November?
would be on the ballot this November. But the second piece to that is what I mentioned. There is a court suit out there that has been filed. And if the taxpayers prevail in that, and we don't have an opportunity to fix our system through you can't create statute and fix this. You would have to fix this through opening up the Constitution and allow for such a system to be built. Now, the system would still have to be built. But if the taxpayers were to prevail in that suit, and let's just say this didn't pass for a second time, I'm concerned about where we would be in terms of being able to collect state and or local sales.
Oh, we surely don't want the taxpayers to keep some of the money.
Right. Mr. Tom?
Jason, I want the council also to know that I have communicated with LMA officials, with extensively with Representative Stefanski. I wrote emails. I don't know if Karen White shared some of my thoughts with you, Jason, about the statutory schematics. That was one of my concerns about the amendment going forward without the framework to be included. And I think that this bill is going to cure some of that. And also the new lawsuit that's been filed brings it even all the more important that the public understand the importance of this insofar as their local tax base is concerned and their local, and the competitiveness of the local economy, because the local taxpayers are going to be paying taxes, whereas those goods bought out of state through Amazon and all these other entities that are huge taxpayers now as a result of this are not going to be collected for the city of Crowley or any other entity in the state of Louisiana.
School?
What's the position of the 64 school boards that currently handle parish taxes?
So the school boards do not handle it for 64 parishes. The school boards do collect in the majority of the parishes, but you have the sheriffs who collect in about 8 parishes. You have some parishes that actually in the 90s, when we had to move from 463 collectors to 1 per parish, like in Baton Rouge, it's the mayor's office that collects it. You had to select one entity within that parish, and if you didn't, then it defaulted to a commission. So you have a couple parishes that actually have a commission. But as I was mentioning earlier, the LSBA, the Louisiana School Boards Association, the Sheriff's Association, the Municipal Association, the Police Jury Association, all supported this concept. Not only did they support it, they helped draft the bill that you see before you. And look, there's no, I mean, if you sit there and speak with the school boards, the mayors, the sheriff, there is no doubt they realize we've got to move in this direction. And the 19 stakeholders agree with that. So.
And during this transition period to get this implemented, they would have to restructure their organizations because that task wouldn't be necessary for them to handle any longer.
Maybe, maybe not. And so once you have an, so just like you have here today, the school board collects in Acadia Parish, and they then take it and have a contract with each of the entities that are the recipient of those sales tax, and they have a contract with the school board to collect, and the school board then takes the fee from that collection. when you create this entity, you can really do it in a number of ways. What the Supreme Court is saying is that you should interface with one entity, just like when we moved from 463 collectors to one for each parish, you're interfacing. So this would allow for that entity, if it wanted to still contract with the Acadia School Board and provide a lot of the same functions that it's currently providing. There's nothing that would prohibit that entity from entering. And in many ways, I think that is probably going to be a part of the segue into the board. I would think that would be the structure. If you look up and around the North Louisiana area, they got together, and there's about 5 parishes that got together, and there's one entity that collects on behalf of all 5 parishes through an agreement, and that kind of consolidates, makes things more efficient, makes things less costly, and at the end of the day, the recipient bodies are getting more in sales tax revenue because there's less cost due to collection, due to a lot of the efficiencies, and I really think that you would see a lot of those efficiencies through this type of entity.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah.
Mr. Cavilli?
First, I want to thank you, Jason, for coming all this way. It's not often you probably go to little towns like this and the like, but as a business person and practitioner who does work throughout several states in the United States, it's very beneficial to go to, say, Pennsylvania, and you just click on the different counties in which you've done work in, you put what the amount of revenues you earned or spent, and it's already calculated for you. So it streamlines tremendously than having to do each separate county and deal with their county aid separately. So from that standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't we the only one of 2 states left in the United States that is still this antiquated system?
That's correct, and I think that's why Louisiana, and Louisiana is probably not in the best position of the 2, which is why I think we drew the lawsuit. I think it was easiest to identify as being so far out of compliance. What we have tried to do is continue to build little entities to deal with our system being out of compliance. That's how the Remote Sales Commission was born. You all were at one time collecting that, realized you can't get your hands on it. This goes back all the way to the card catalog sales, okay? And you basically have turned that over to the state because you realize you would not be able to get the dollars if it wasn't done through a centralized entity. And so the question is that system even constitutional? But because the Constitution doesn't allow for it. It's your authority, and now you got a Remote Sales Commission that's housed under the Department of Revenue collecting your sales tax dollars and taking a fee and turning it around. But the reason you all are agreeing to doing that is because you have no other way to get your hands on the dollars. And if we don't fix the system as a whole, those little types of things are going to continue to mount. And at some point, there's going to be some sort of injunction to prevent us from even collecting the sales tax that they could do to us.
Thank you, Mr. Greer, for coming and giving us that information. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Alderman. And look, again, if there's any questions that you all may have, or I didn't cover something, feel free to reach out, get in touch with me. I'd be glad to try to get answers.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Okay, I understand, the voters that voted for it, what was the reasoning that the voters gave for voting against it?
Yeah, that's hard to gauge just simply because I don't know what each voter was thinking when they went in to the booth. But what I will tell you, so there were 2 constitutional amendments that dealt with tax reform, and they were packaged up last November. Constitutional Amendment number 2, which did pass, the ballot language was very easy. Do you want your income taxes to go down? I mean, who's going to go in and say, nope? But when you get to a complicated subject like this, and you read that ballot language, and it probably doesn't impact each and every person that walks through that booth, and you're looking at a paragraph about centralized sales tax administration and all the language that was in there, I'm gonna be honest, it's just confusing. I do this for a living, and I know a lot of people do this for a living, and they're still trying to understand all the components. So I think the education process, probably needs to be ratcheted up. Of course, that takes money, that takes dollars to be able to get the message out there and what we're trying to, or what the legislature is trying to accomplish. But I really think a lot of it was due to voter confusion. And the statistics that I have read is when a voter walks in to the booth and doesn't understand the language on a constitutional amendment, the tendency is just vote no, because you don't know what you're voting for.
Misinformation, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank y'all. Okay.
Thank you. All right, moving along, we're gonna take line 11 and come before line 6. Line 11 is resolutions. It's a resolution, if you look in your packet, it's under the agenda. It's a resolution of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Crowley to continue the public hearing on the Cassandra Davis property situated on Lot 4 of Block 27 of the City of Crowley, Katy Parish, Louisiana. This did not go to committee. And asking for a motion, please.
So moved.
I have to abstain.
Okay.
Okay, I second.
Okay.
Continue the public.
Yes, it's a continue, meaning that it's a postponement. We're postponing, that's correct, we are postponing the public hearing, and we will be refixing it for the next meeting, which is going to be May 11th, I think. I'm sorry, pass that up. May 11th, that is correct. So if you would write that down, it would be May 11th. Okay, that was offered by Mr. Cabell, seconded by Mr. Primo. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? And Mr. Martin abstains. Okay, the next is a resolution of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Crowley, State of Louisiana, declaring the week of April 11th through 15th, 2022 is National Community Development Week.
Offered.
Offered by Mr. Martin, seconded by Mr. Core. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is item C, a resolution. The Board of Aldermen of the City of Crowley agrees to adopt this new resolution in addition to resolution number 2014-03, authorizing the presiding mayor of the City of Crowley to execute an intergovernmental cooperative endeavor agreement between the Department of the City of Crowley and any amendments necessary modifications thereto, memorializing the agreements between the parties relative to the above stated properties transfers. So, yeah, Department of DOT. Motion, please. Yeah.
I so moved.
Second.
Offered by Mr. Bell, seconded by Mr. Craver. Discussion? All in favor?
Wait.
Well, hold it.
I'm sorry. I didn't see it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, what is, in particular, what is different from the one in 2014? I read over the one we did in 2014 and the new one.
The difference is the description of pavement structure for the segment between Parkinson and Point to the east, where the new alignment B, the existing alignment for the relocation purpose. So you want to know what segments involved. It's about 0.17 miles of road that basically runs in front of Rice Palace and Pizza. The existing condition 1, which refers to in the corporate endeavor agreement, says, provide repairs to segment 1 to include cold plane removal of existing asphalted concrete surface, line treatment of the base as required, a 25-foot wide and 10-inch thick Class 2 base, a 24-foot wide type E interlayer asphalted surface treatment, a 24-foot wide and 5-inch thick super paved asphalted binder and wearing course. And it goes on to talk about paving markings later. What I just described is the structure of the new pavement that would be put into place for that segment. DOTD wants to do something different, so they want to make this specific description more general, and then come to an agreement. And if you read the resolution, it says, condition 1, provide repairs to segment 1 to be transferred to the city of Crowley as mutually agreed to by the department in the city of Crowley in accordance with the plan and specifications. So we have to agree to it. What we're going to agree to then is wording that we received from the DOTD in correspondence. And it says now it's not in the CEA, but we have to mutually agree to it, and this is what we would mutually agree to. Segment 1 will include a 2-inch asphalted concrete wearing course, a 4-inch asphalted concrete binder course, 8.5 inches of base course, both class 1 in place, and a 12-inch subgrade layer. There will be provisions in the plans for additional subgrade treatment below the in-place base course sections on an as-needed basis. This is clearly a better pavement structure than what was specified in the original agreement. So now we have the resolution that you're going to adopt that says we have to agree to it, and they've already given us a description that we can agree to.
So in layman terms, we were at the beginning getting a 4-inch, now we're getting a 6-inch.
It's better than that.
Better than that, probably.
We were getting, let me get to my,
I'm sorry, I'm just talking about the top course, Tim.
right, but wearing binder base and subbase is by far better in this instance than it was in the original CEA.
Yes. Mr. Corbett?
And all these will be constructed within the existing right-of-way.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Mayor, just wanted to amend it to include Department of Transportation
That's good.
Development.
LDTOD, that's the word department. Yes, sir.
I'll second.
And offered by Mr. Core, seconded by Mr. Primo. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So noted as changed. Okay. All right, since we made a motion on the public hearing being reset, we'll go to 7, the agenda amendment. Line 8, approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on March 9th, 2022.
Move.
Offered by Mr. Martin,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Stringfellow. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next is the special council meeting held on April 6th, 2022.
That's a move.
Offered by Mr. Ford, seconded by Mr. Prater. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, next is the mayor's report, sales tax chart. We are approximately 4% above last year, which is good. And I think it came up to roughly overall for the year, it's around 8% above. All right, next is the sewer user fee. And we are a little down compared to last, about 6%, which is not too bad. And then next report is our budget analysis, which we are pretty close, and we are pretty in line with where we need to be.
Mayor,
Ma'am?
are we close to our audit being complete, or
Hopefully it's completed by next week, I hope.
next week?
Yes, ma'am?
Okay, thank you.
I hope. Okay, and the spaces are where they need to be. So which is great. All right, we'll move into standing committee reports. Public Works, Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Works Committee convened Wednesday, April 6, 2022 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers and the quorum was present. Under action items, the motion was offered by Alderman Vernon Martin and seconded by myself to approve partial payment estimate number 21 under the Southern Constructors Incorporated contract for the citywide drainage improvements project in the amount of $39,842.29. That motion carried and I so move.
Second.
Offered by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Cord. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The motion was offered by myself and seconded by Alderman Byron Wildridge to approve partial payment estimate number 5 under the Glenn Leger Construction LLC contract for the citywide street improvements contract A project in the amount of $736,908.87. That motion carried and I so move.
Second.
Offered by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Cavell. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The motion was offered by myself and seconded by Alderman Vernon Martin to authorize a resolution to amend the existing cooperative endeavor agreement between the city of Crowley and LADOTD regarding LADOTD's project to relocate a portion of Rice Capital Parkway. That motion carried.
Since we already have to do that. Yeah.
We just did.
Yes, we just have to.
Okay, under non-action item, Public Works Director, Mr. Albert John presented the monthly Public Works report. Street Commissioner, Mr. Gilbert Osteen presented the monthly Street Commissioner's report. And City Engineer, Mr. Tim Mader presented the monthly Engineer's report. Alderman Clint Crater and myself discussed handicap access to parks and sidewalks after the street overlay is completed. City Engineer Tim Mader noted the city has applied twice for a Safe Routes to Schools grant to improve sidewalks leading to schools. However, the applications were not successful. I inquired about smoke testing and the possibility of having to break up the streets to do the testing. The city engineer responded it was a possibility, but that would have to be determined at the time of the smoke testing in that area. We had hired Mr. Rich Hughes to address the committee on the handicap accessibility sidewalk grant for Levy Park, the Rotary Club of Crowley is pursuing. Mr. Hughes also spoke to the need for handicap access for the criminal justice building entrance at the West 5th Street entrance. The mayor noted there is handicap accessibility to the building on the North Avenue entrance to the building. Police Chief Broussard explained the problem arises that there is no one from the police department to provide access to the secured exit of the building after hours. There was no further business to come before the Public Works Committee, and the committee recessed.
Thank you, Mr. Crater. Next, Mr. Martin, Utility Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Utility Committee convened Wednesday, April 6th, 4 p.m. in the council chamber. The quorum was present. There were no action items. Under non-action items, the wastewater superintendent Tim Crater presented the monthly wastewater report, and city engineer Tim Mader presented the monthly engineering report. There will be no further business to come before the utility committee. We recess.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Next, Mr. Primo, Recreation Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Recreation Committee meeting convened on Wednesday, April 6, 2022 at 4 p.m. Under action items, there were none. Under non-action items, Recreation Director Peter Kirsch presented the monthly Recreation Department report. City Engineer Tim Mader presented the monthly Engineer's report. There was no further business to come before the Recreation Committee, and the committee recessed.
Thank you, Mr. Primo. Zoning and annexation, since Mr. Fogelman is not with us today. Mr. Martin? Zoning and annexation, please.
I'm lost for a minute. Okay, zoning and annexation committee convened Wednesday. Zoning and annexation committee convened Wednesday, April 6th at 4 p.m. in the council chambers. The quorum was present.
On the action item, a motion was offered by Alderwoman Kim Stringfield and second by Alderman Sammy Reggie to authorize the resolution of the mayor and board of aldermen of the city of Crowley, Acadia Parish, Louisiana, introducing a proposed ordinance and calling for a public hearing at the regular meeting at the board of the mayor and board of aldermen, May 11th, to amend and react Appendix 8 of the zoning ordinance of the Code of Ordinance of the city of Crowley, amending the official zoning map of the city of Crowley to rezone and change the classification of Lot 6 and 7 of Block 34 of South Crowley, addition belonging to 3 Properties LLC, from R4 multifamily to II light industry, to appeal all ordinance or parts of ordinance contrary thereto, or in conflict therewith, to provide for the provisions thereof to be servable, and to provide for all matters relatively thereto. Motion carried and I submit.
Second.
Offered by Mr. Morton, seconded by Mr. Cadell. And let the record show that it is item 1. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And this is to set the date. Thank you.
On the non-action item, city engineer Tim May to present the monthly engineer's report, and there'll be no further business coming for the zoning and administration committee recess.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. All right, next is public safety, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Eric. The Public Safety Committee convened Wednesday, April 6, 2022, at 4 p.m. in the council chambers. Alderwoman Kim Stringfellow chaired the meeting, and a quorum was present. Under action items, there were none. Under non-action items, Chief of Police Jimmy Broussard presented the monthly police department report. Fire Chief Louis Bruder Romero presented the monthly fire department report. City Inspector Tony Duhon was not present. His report was read by Alderwoman Stringfellow. Mr. Chris George addressed the committee to discuss violent criminal activity, especially gun violence, and the need to have something for the kids in the community to do. Mayor Monso informed the committee he is working on a Boys and Girls Club for Crowley and a football combine on June 24th through the 26th. The combine will be held at Garden Memorial Stadium for junior high and high school age students. He stated it would be an annual event with participation from NFL players. Mr. Rich Hughes and Alderwoman Kim Stringfellow suggested the city work with the Rotary Club, which is trying to start a Boys and Girls Club. Public safety concerns were addressed by Chief Broussard regarding the warehouse building located at 500 South Parkinson Avenue. The owner of the building, Chad Atkinson, appeared before the committee and stated he believed he would have the repairs to the building completed in 2 to 3 months. The building will be resheeted and have a new roof. He currently has placed a security fence around the property and is removing any loose debris that could fly off the building during high winds. Alderman Cavell suggested to Mr. Atkinson that he post no trespassing signs on the property. There was no further action to come before the Public Safety Committee, and the committee recessed.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Next is Public Buildings Committee. Mr. Willard is not here today, and Ms. Stringfellow.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Buildings Committee convened Wednesday, April 6th at 4 p.m. in council chambers. The quorum was present. There were no non-action items or action items. However, we do have an action item that did not go to committee. And this is to consider sponsorship for the 2022 National Day of Prayer requested by Ms. Peggy Sandage on Thursday, May 5th, 2022 at the Rice Festival Building at 6 p.m. And I so move.
Second.
Offered by Ms. Stringfellow, seconded by Mr. Ford. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There was no further business to come before the Public Buildings Committee and committee recess.
Thank you, Ms. Stringfellow. I will ask you to continue on insurance and personnel.
Thank you, Mayor. The Insurance and Personnel Committee convened A quorum was present. There were no action items or non-action items. And there was no other business to come before the Insurance and Personnel Committee, and the committee recessed.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is Community and Economic Development, Mr. Reddy.
Thank you, Mayor. Community and Economic Development Committee convened Wednesday, April 6, 2022 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers. A quorum was present. Under action items, there were none. Under non-action items, I provided updates from Crowley Tourism, the Kitty Parish Chamber of Commerce, and the Crowley Garden Club. I announced the Clean the City contest judges will be in town tomorrow, April 7th, and the Garden Club is sponsor of the city. In the event, once again, the Garden Club was having their 40th annual flower show on April 21st from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. and April 22nd from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Bank of Commerce and Trust Company in Crowley. The Kitty Parish Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring their annual golf tournament on Friday, April 8th, and the Greetings for Living Works next and final event for the year was April 22nd. Crowley Tourism is continuing to work with the Rice City Classic Car and Tractor Show, which was scheduled for May 28th. And Crowley Main Street has been conducting interviews for the Main Street Director and hopes to have a new hire by next month. On April 9th, Main Street is having a sidewalk sale, and April 29th is their Art and Wine Stroll. And Mayor Alonso recognized me for my efforts and responsibilities with the Clean the City contest. What's not on here,
Mr. Reggie, if you don't mind, what if you would give us that great information?
yeah, so we passed to state finals. We'll be up against Abbeville.
Westland.
Pineville, which is their first time. And then the ones that went last year were West Monroe, and we'll be up against them as well. The judges will be here on Tuesday, May 10th at 1:15 p.m. So the mayor and I will be getting together for that. The other thing was we had a question about the car show and the Jambalaya cook-off. So talking with Val, she said if all the teams could get together and get ahead of time registered, she'll let everybody know, depending on the amount of teams, how much rice for everybody to cook for the amount of people. Right now, she's saying between 100 to 150 people is what you should be cooking for. But if you have, let's say, 8 or 10 teams, you might have to cook for, let's say, maybe 75. It just depends on that. And there was no further business to come before.
If you look at your packet, you do have something on
Absolutely.
your agenda at the very beginning on your agenda page.
You want to do the mayor to sign
Yes,
proclamation
sir.
for national community development?
Yes, sir, that's what I'm doing right now. And if I may, I will read the proclamation. Whereas the 54th anniversary of the National Fair Housing Law, Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 during the month of April is an occasion for all Americans, individually and collectively, to rededicate themselves to the principle of freedom from housing discrimination whenever it exists. And whereas this law guarantees each citizen the critical personnel element of freely choosing a home. Whereas a fair housing law has been passed by the state of Louisiana, and implementation of the law requires the positive commitment, involvement, and support of each of our citizens. And whereas the Board of Aldermen and the Mayor of the City of Crowley, Louisiana, to provide leadership in the effort to make fair housing not just an idea, but an ideal for all our citizens. And whereas barriers that diminish the rights and limit the options of any citizen to freely choose a home will ultimately diminish the rights and limit the options of all. Now therefore, I, Tim Monson, Mayor of the City of Crowley, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Fair Housing Month. Go ahead, continue, Mr. Lake.
And then number 2, to authorize a resolution of the Board of Aldermen.
And we already did that.
Did that already?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And if there's no further business to come before Community and Economic Development Committee, the committee will recess.
Thank you, sir, appreciate it. Next Mr. Cabell, Revenue and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Revenue and Finance Committee convened on Wednesday, April 6, 2022 at 4 p.m. in council chambers. The quorum was present. Under action items, a motion was offered by myself and seconded by Alderman Sammy Reggie to authorize a resolution of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Crowley authorizing a standby letter of credit to be issued by the First National Bank of Louisiana on behalf of the City of Crowley for the benefit of the Louisiana Office of Workers' Compensation in an amount not to exceed $300,000 and to authorize a revolving line of credit up to $300,000 evidenced by a promissory note in the amount of the letter of credit, to authorize the pledge of an unencumbered certificate of deposit as security for the standby letter of credit, and to provide for all matters relative thereto and in connection therewith. The motion carried, and I so move.
Second.
Offered by Mr. Cabell, seconded by Mr. Primo. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There were no other actions to come before the Finance and Revenue Committee. The committee then recessed.
Thank you. According to our agenda, 11 has already been done, which is resolutions. Other business cannot be taken at this time because we have to have a public hearing before we can actually act on that. Next is item 13, engineer's report. Mr. Mayor.
Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I ask for a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Offered by Mr.
I have
Cabell.
a question before we adjourn.
It's probably, if it has to do with this
Let's do
agenda.
it paper, yes.
Paper,
Yes, our agenda, yes.
okay?
I think it was just an error in maybe copying, but we have a partial resolution on the Revenue and Finance Committee report that's not complete, so maybe,
Okay,
yeah, I'll show it to you.
okay. Great, thank you. Offered by Mr. Cabell, second by Mr. Reggie. All in favor? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
There you go.
Kim.
All right.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.